Welcome back to Content Classroom. This week, I want to share why I felt like a fraud when I first started out. And I did. It's tough to talk about, right? A lot of the people that I work with are relatively new in what they're doing, usually. Quite a lot of people are former corporate world. They've exited, now they're launching their own business, they're launching their own podcast, all those sorts of things. And I think we all go through something very similar at the start of that business journey, because for years we've done what we're told to do by corporate, and we're not used to having to think for ourselves. We're not used to having to be entrepreneurial and make all the decisions. And I remember so my first client for Javelin was an investor. Hi, Simon. Was an investor for the previous business that I'd worked in. And they were so impressed by the swarm of content I created for the business I worked for. When I left those guys to do my own thing and set up shop, they were first in the queue, which was fantastic. But I remember sending out that first invoice and kind of having to figure out how much to charge, what the value of my services were, and being super paranoid, because I knew that when you produce video content, when you produce content of any kind on social media, it's really, really hard to attribute that to sales. And the reason for that is that so many people view your content 5, 6, 10, 20 times, and there is no action taken on that content. So you'd see me offering tip after advice, after tip, after hack, after technology, whatever. People don't necessarily come and buy from me at that moment in time. They don't always drop me a DM to say, hey, I saw your content and I'm really impressed. I've got a podcast starting. I want to work with you. Or, I've got a conference I did 2 weeks ago and I'd love to have it repurposed into clips so we can use it on socials. More commonly, what happens is people get to the point where they've seen enough of my videos that I've started cogs turning in their heads, where we mention, the power of those short form videos. And eventually they find themselves on my website looking at video repurposing, and then they reach out. So technically that sale comes through the website. It's really hard to attribute that back to the clips. And the only real way you can do that is by kind of checking in with the clients themselves. Well, where did you first hear from us? Sometimes they might remember that it was through the content, but more often than not, well, I just ended up on your website. So I've always been quite paranoid of that with clients, because, I came from a SaaS world where everything was ROI. Like, what's the ROI in this? And I thought my clients, especially at the beginning, were going to be more tech companies. And they're rightly focused on ROI themselves. So if they make a market spend, they want to know, what am I going to get back from this? How much revenue am I going to generate from doing this activity? And I find that's really hard conversation to have at the beginning, because I wasn't really focusing on the right values and metrics and things like that for my own business. And it felt like a bit of a fraud, if I'm honest. I felt like I was I felt like I was selling them the content, but not the actual method to do it. And like they were only getting half of it, like they weren't getting me. And I was a bit worried that it was me that was doing it from my previous business. So I was a bit worried that they were going to get the content, but not understand how to get it out there and how to work with it. So I worked with the first few clients and I made sure that I was the one distributing their content as well, so I could write the content for them. And as time's gone on, I now work with clients quite regularly. I try and actually put people off getting me to do their copy and stuff for them, because it's not my strength. It's not what I want to do, really. I can do it, but it's not as fun as there's the video editing side of things. And people see miles more value than they ever used to, because I set the conversation up in the right way now, where they can, I can explain to them what the real value is from the moment I speak to them. And I think that's important for all of us, right? Is when we're creating our own content, early days, it's going to be super hard to talk. You're going to feel like an imposter when you're on camera, when you're recording your content, when you're doing whatever you're doing. But as time goes on, you become more clear on your message, your value, who your customers are, how to talk to them. And telling your story, sharing your story is super important to keep doing. I haven't really fundamentally changed that much of what I do. We've expanded on the services and we've added new things in as the market's told me, I want this, or we want that, or actually this is really useful, or whatever. We do that. But fundamentally, it's the same service that we provide that I started on day one. The only thing that's changed is how I talk about what we do. So it's developing that message as you go. And I've, hands on heart, like a lot of that's come from external people. external people who I've worked with, who have paid for help. I've networked with them. We've reciprocated services for each other, and I've gotten that advice. A lot of that comes from that, but a lot of it comes from internally as well. Spending time thinking about, is this the right thing? Is this the right way of, and then watching people's faces as I describe it to them to see what's resonating and what's not. So my advice to you from today's episode Content Classroom is, when you're creating content for your business, no matter what medium that is, no matter whether it's video, text, otherwise, doesn't matter. Remember that in the early days, we're all in the same boat. We all feel like imposters. We all feel like we're invisible, like nobody will hear us, like they won't care what we have to say. Our content, our outputs don't have real value. We'll worry about all these things. And once you've been in business for a little while, and I'm not saying by any means I'm experienced, I'm starting third year here, but as time goes on, you find it easier to convey the stuff that's valuable to people. You'll cue into what it is that they want to hear from you, and you can hone your message to talk about that much more concisely and clearly. It gets them down your pipeline quicker, but more importantly, convinces them to watch more of your content in the first place. Real lessons from a real founder. Hope that's useful, and I will see you next week on Content Classroom. Bye-bye.